Beneath the mausoleum, a second, secret level. Officially, the depth of the foundation is 7 meters. In reality, beneath the sarcophagus there is an armored shaft about 23 meters deep. Until 1991, a duplicate body was kept there in case of nuclear war or a terrorist attack. Today, according to one version attributed to a former Kremlin commandant, Stalin's body allegedly lies there in full ceremonial uniform, secretly reburied around 2013 to 2014. There is also a theory that clippings of hair and nails are still stored in lead containers in the basement of the laboratory for possible cloning in the future. The mausoleum is essentially a giant pyramid. If you measure the angles of the mausoleum's slopes, they almost exactly repeat the angle of the Great Pyramid of Cheops. This is said not to be accidental. The architect Alexei Shusov was reportedly connected with Freemasonry and designed the mausoleum as an energy pyramid intended to preserve the body. The theory that Lenin's mausoleum is a functional pyramid built according to the proportions and angles of Egyptian pyramids has been discussed for about 30 years, especially since the early 2000s. The slope angle of the mausoleum's faces is about 53 degrees 12 minutes. The height is about 12. The Pyramid of Cheops has an angle of 51 degrees 50 minutes, a difference of only about 1 degree and 20 minutes, which some argue falls within construction tolerance. Measurements were reportedly repeated with a laser theodolite in 2008. This proportion is sometimes described as a classical pyramidal ratio involving the square root of 2 and the golden ratio. According to one claim, Shusov studied these ideas in the 1912 book Secrets of the Egyptian Pyramids by Petrov, which was said to be in his personal library. In the Soviet magazine Technika, Molodyozy, issue number 1 from 1989, there was an article titled Pyramids over Red Square, which discussed the angles of the mausoleum. According to the story, the author, an engineer from the Khrunichev Design Bureau, later disappeared from the editorial staff and the article itself vanished from some electronic archives. Another version claims that a former Kremlin employee once said that Shusov was not simply a Mason but a member of the 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite. Allegedly, in his archive there existed a blueprint of the mausoleum with the grid of the Cheops pyramid superimposed on it and the note, according to the laws of eternity. One quote attributed to that story says, "The form of eternity is the pyramid. The angle is 51 degrees 52 minutes, like the great Cheops. Lenin will lie under the same ray as the pharaohs." Another statement attributed to Shusov says that in 1952 he allegedly told his student Voskresenskiy, "I gave Ilyich eternity in stone, like the pharaohs." The phrase "according to the laws of eternity" refers to an old idea from Egyptian and later Hermetic traditions that pyramidal geometry allows a body or soul to be preserved forever. The central concept is the geometric law of the pyramid. Ancient Egyptians and later European occult thinkers believed that a pyramid with an angle of about 51 degrees 50 minutes to 52 degrees creates a special field that slows the decay of organic matter, naturally dries and mummifies tissues, and preserves what they called the life force. In Europe during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, experiments were popular in which small cardboard pyramids were placed over pieces of meat. The meat sometimes dried rather than rotting, largely because of airflow and dehydration. These demonstrations became widely known. According to some interpretations, Shusov knew about such experiments and deliberately repeated the Cheops angles so that the mausoleum itself could function as a large natural preservation chamber, even if scientific maintenance were ever discontinued. Within higher degrees of Freemasonry there is also a symbolic concept called the architecture of eternity. The pyramid represents the immortality of the initiate. On the American dollar bill the pyramid is unfinished, symbolizing a process that continues. In this interpretation, Shusuf supposedly intended the mausoleum to represent a completed pyramid, a monument to achieved immortality. There is also an esoteric interpretation based on proportions. One formula connects the height of a pyramid with half of its base through the golden ratio. Another ancient proportion sometimes cited is 7:11:14 for height, half base, and slant edge. In the 1930 stone version of Lenin's Mausoleum, the height is about 12 meters and the base proportions come close to these ratios within a small margin. Several quotes are sometimes attributed to people who worked in the preservation laboratory. Professor Vorobiyov, who supervised preservation work during the mid-20th century, is sometimes quoted as saying that the form of the mausoleum was not chosen by accident and that the pyramid itself helps preserve, while scientists only assist. Academician Yuri Lopukhin reportedly recalled Shusuf saying that the stone should continue working even after the people maintaining the body are gone. In this interpretation, the phrase "according to the laws of eternity" simply means that the structure was designed so that even without electricity, equipment, or chemicals, the geometry itself would slow natural decay. How ancient civilizations supposedly arrived at this geometry is another mystery often discussed. Many structures around the world have slopes close to 52 degrees. Examples often mentioned include the Great Pyramid of Cheops in Egypt, the Pyramid of Menkaure, the Ziggurat of Ur in Mesopotamia, Silbury Hill in England, the Royal Burial Mound of Makop in the Caucasus, the burial complex of Qingshi Huang in China, and the Mausoleum on Red Square. The differences between their slopes are often described as very small. Some enthusiasts argue that the probability of such similarity happening by chance is extremely low. In 1973, a Soviet physicist named Anatoly Golitsyn reportedly carried out experiments with gas convection inside pyramid-shaped structures. According to accounts of these experiments, if a pyramid is built with a slope close to 51 degrees 52 minutes, a stationary zone appears inside at about 1/3 of the height from the base. Within that zone, objects tend to dry rather than decay. Bacterial growth slows down, and certain physical measurements can behave differently. Some researchers suggested that this could be connected to patterns of air movement or static electricity. Whether these effects are caused by geometry, airflow, or simple dehydration remains debated. The most intriguing question remains how ancient builders could have known about such a configuration 5,000 years ago. Some suggest it was discovered gradually through trial and error in burial practices. Others propose that the knowledge may have been inherited from earlier cultures. A more philosophical idea is that certain geometric relationships simply emerge whenever civilizations experiment with large monuments. Returning to Shusuf, one interpretation says he did not invent anything new. Instead, he used a form that had already appeared many times in history whenever societies attempted to build structures meant to symbolize eternity. When he wrote the phrase "according to the laws of eternity," the idea was not mystical but practical. The design followed geometric principles that had been discovered long ago and still function regardless of belief. The irony is that a state that officially rejected religion ended up building, in the center of its capital, a structure that resembles an ancient monumental tomb. The first version of the mausoleum was built extremely quickly. When Vladimir Lenin died on January 21, 1924, the government urgently needed a place where people could say goodbye. Alexei Shusov was summoned to the Kremlin and asked to design a structure that would fit into Red Square and be built almost immediately. He created the design within hours. Construction began the next morning, but the ground was frozen solid and filled with deep layers of historical soil. Workers had to break through it using explosives. Work continued day and night without interruption. The first mausoleum was made of wood and was meant to be temporary. Later, a second wooden version appeared with improved design. Finally, in 1930, the permanent stone structure was completed. T was built from red granite and dark labradorite, with a stepped form, an entrance hall, internal corridors, and a glass sarcophagus in the central chamber. The question of what has happened to the body itself is often discussed. Officially, its preservation is maintained by a scientific laboratory that regularly treats the tissues and controls temperature and humidity. This work has continued for decades and is considered unique in the field of biological preservation. Some alternative stories claim that the geometry of the building itself also contributes to preservation, although this idea is debated. Another aspect often mentioned is the atmosphere visitors feel inside. People who enter the mausoleum usually become quiet without being told to do so. Conversations stop. Movement slows down. Visitors walk in silence past the sarcophagus and leave the chamber without lingering. Some psychologists have suggested that this effect is related to context, lighting, architecture, and the emotional weight of seeing the preserved body of a historical leader. In such spaces, brain activity often shifts from alert analytical thinking toward a calmer reflective state. Heart rate may drop slightly, and people become more introspective. Many visitors describe the atmosphere as solemn and almost ceremonial. Because of this, the mausoleum sometimes feels less like a museum and more like a ritual space. Over the decades, many rumors have appeared around it, stories about hidden levels, underground shafts, secret laboratories, pyramidal geometry, and mysterious energy fields. The body is an instrument of power. After death, Lenin was transformed. He became more than just a historical figure. He became a material symbol of the state. The queue to the mausoleum wasn't just a mourning ritual. It was a demonstration of loyalty, of collective faith, a way to be part of the Soviet myth. In essence, the body became what holy relics are in religious tradition. But this wasn't religion in the usual sense. This was political religion. Lenin lay in the center of the country as proof. The idea is alive. The leader remains with the people. History is not over. The physical body is stronger than abstract memory. Why does the presence of a body matter so much to us? Because memory is abstract. A monument is a symbol. A portrait is an image. But a body is presence. The brain perceives physical remains completely differently. When you see the real body of a leader, a sense of continuity kicks in. He was, and somehow, he still is. Psychology calls this an embodied symbol. The idea gains flesh. It stops being a slogan and becomes a literal object before your eyes. This is why the mausoleum works, even on those with no ideology at all. It triggers the brain's most ancient mechanisms, the fear of death, the search for immortality, the need to touch the great. This isn't a Soviet invention. It is an ancient mechanism. Egypt had the pharaohs. Christianity had saints. Buddhism had relics. Everywhere, the logic is the same. People physically feel a presence when they see remains. It's not superstition, it's neurobiology. Mirror neurons react to the human form, even a dead one. Visitor reactions were recorded. About 30% wept without any visible reason. Many described the sensation that he is watching. Some fainted. Not from the heat, but from emotional shock. Journalists describe a strange slowing of time inside. A feeling that the body is larger than it appears from the outside. An almost religious silence that no one dares to break. The longer you look at the mausoleum, the less it seems like mere architecture. Some of these stories are myths. Some are misunderstandings.